All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting. It is Monday, April 17th, a little bit after 4 o'clock, and I'm joined by Joe Threat, myself, Councilmember Morrell. We do have some folks from the law department here as well. We've got plenty on the agenda today. So Angela, why don't you come up first? The first part we want to talk about is the offer letters and whether everyone's offer letter matches up with what their appraisal showed, because I know that that's a question that we up here have been asking.
Okay,
Good afternoon.
greetings to everyone. I just want to start today. I'm not going to pretend like last week did not happen. It's very important just to note and honor that we left a Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting last week with great intention that what was discussed in this meeting was going to transpire the way it was discussed. So we're not here to prolong the time about it, but we're also not going to pretend like it didn't happen. And the reason we're not going to pretend like it didn't happen is because we have additional agreements that we need to make today. And something's got to look different about even believing that any agreements that are made today are going to transpire differently. And so one of the things that we aim to accomplish today is ensuring that this meeting brings forth resolve during the meeting, because we are unable to continue carrying on conversations based on things that people who are in the room should be able to determine, or whoever you need to call to get them on the line to determine. But we need resolve for the things that we need to get done today. We believe that that's very possible. And so we want to participate in the spirit of moving this forward. But we're not going to pretend like last week was not, as you would say, JP Morrell, a clusterfuck, because that's exactly what it was. It was shameful beyond measure, and we don't want to experience it again, because it was disrespectful to everybody's time, disrespectful to people's mental, emotional, and physical well-being, and disrespectful to whatever people come to this place to do, to attend to business in real ways. So starting this meeting with, once again, asking for the utmost respect and appreciation for what the residents of Gordon Plaza are here for, because this only has to be as antagonistic as you all, the city of New Orleans, desire it to be. It can be as seamless as it needs to be today, or it can be whatever it needs to be today, because the police have already been called once after the lights went out. An entire task force had been called a second time, and a third time, simply because people came here at 3 o'clock, as they were asked to do. We're here for hours into the dark. And right when the last 9 people were to get their letters, suddenly there's a delivery at the door. And we understand some people like that. We understand that's how some people move. But we understand how we move, and we have a goal to accomplish today. So we'd like to accomplish these goals. So starting with issue number 1, yes, it is the case that we have some offer letters that do not match the appraisals that have been provided. And the residents know what was on their appraisal because they have it. And so we're simply counting it a mistake that we would like to have corrected. We see no need for number 1 to be a reason for any argument today. We see it as something that needs correction. We are requesting that it be corrected, and we were requesting that the offer letters be provided to residents. And the residents can sign for them now. And if there happens to be a resident who's not physically present, they will get the necessary permission that they need to get it, because we're not going to continue this back and forth. So we mean today, and we do mean now.
I appreciate that, Angela. Do you have a list of the properties you can give to Andrew so that he can start trying to get that?
Yes, I will
Owen?
submit them again.
Thank you. And Andrew, if you can go with the folks at law and get that cleared up, thanks.
It did not match, meaning it was lower. The offer letter was lower than the actual. They'll check it and verify. Yeah, we just added a couple more right now. We can verify those and let us.
Okay, great. Thank you. While he's working on that, Angela, with law, can we move to Mr. Threat's update on the penalty fees, things like that? That's agenda item number 2?
Yes, we had five properties that Mr. Joseph Threat had already emailed over to us. We had simply just been waiting for the draft letters that specify the fees that need to be waived in relationship to those particular properties. And so at this point, we just need the letters. We asked for them to be in draft form so that we could go ahead and just make sure that residents were on the same page about what was being waived. We understand that there are predatory fees, but when we talk about waiving, we understand the residents are fully clear that we're not talking about the taxes. We are just talking about the fees associated with those taxes. And we do understand that there are levels of interest on there that are in the category of penalty as well. And we are asking for them all to be waived. We understand that you do have the authority to waive those particular fees. And so we just need the letters for those.
Angela, I had and Gordon Plaza residents, good afternoon. I had a meeting last week with Norman White, the CFO, and a discussion with him and Bayou Title on the processes or how we're going to move the funds and everything last week. Well, it was really on the same day as our meeting, the 3 o'clock meeting last week. So what the city is going to do instead of the letters, they're going to waive all penalties for all properties, and they're just going to wipe those penalties out. So it won't be a letter. By the time you get to closing, it won't be penalties on your bill. We talked to Gordon Plaza, Bayou Title about that. They agreed. So you won't even need a letter. You will not have penalties on your tax bill. The other thing the city is going to do is we are going to pick up all the cost of the seller and the buyers. Well, we're paying our own, but we'll pick up all the seller's costs on the transactions going through Bayou Title.
Mr. Threat, if it is the case that there are no letters that are going to be provided, would you please do us the benefit of just sending that to us in an email, what you just said? Can you type that in the email and send it over, please?
Yeah, well, most definitely.
That's item number 2. We're ready to move to item number 3, but we'll wait.
All right, so item number 3, which is the moving service payment via TCA.
So for this particular one, all we need at this time. And do we have a member? We do have TCA. Thank you, TCA, for being here. So grateful you did not have to be here last week or during the week. The only thing we need in regards to item number 3 is the list of moving companies. We understand that TCA had already taken action to go through moving companies. Some of the residents of Gordon Plaza had also submitted some moving companies over to them to ensure that they had an opportunity to compile them. We understand that they are not able to give a list of moving companies unless they've been checked and approved to ensure that they are official businesses within the state of Louisiana, licensed, bonded, insured. And so we just need that list of moving companies in order for the residents of Gordon Plaza to have it and begin making their necessary appointments as needed. Once they decide, should they decide to accept offer letters, they are going to need that list in order to take next steps and make plans. And so we just want to get that list today.
Ms. Thelma, you want to come up? You can come up to the table if you want, wherever you want.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are 2 things. One, we do have the compiled list from the Garden Plaza residents as well as the
I
ones.
can't
we
hear you,
identified.
Miss French.
Okay, we do have the list, a compiled list of the moving companies identified by the Garden Plaza residents as well as those identified by our analysts. We were waiting to get the contract before we went out to ask for the insurance and all of those documents in advance, so that when a resident selects a moving company, we have all of their documentation already on hand. And so hopefully the contract will move forward and we can move forward with getting
It's my understanding this contract should already be,
it. We have
Have
seen
moved
a
forward.
draft, we just have never received a contract. The CEA for moving. Yeah. Okay. Right.
can you all hear Mr. Threat?
Can you hear me?
If you can
Hear me
repeat,
now, right?
please repeat.
Okay, I'll repeat that. The CEA is in draft, it's in law. And right now, the last thing I heard, I talked to Mr. White on Friday, Norman White, and we're trying to establish the first installment to put on that agreement so we can ink the contract. That's the only thing that's left. So out of the 235, we're gonna do installments to you to take care of the moving companies. And I just need to get that first bogey amount that we'll put in that CEA, and it's ready to come back for signature.
Mr. Threat, for our own clarification, I know that you had indicated that all the moving parts around that were already taken care of what seemed to be a couple of weeks ago already.
Right.
So
The problem is that the money we have on contract, until people actually move, we can't move the whole 235,000 to TCA.
mhm.
So what we have to do is we've got a level of moving companies. All of the title closings are not coming back the same day. So we want to take a amount of that 235, advance it to TCA so they've got cash available.
Okay, just to be clear, so both the city of New Orleans and TCA are on the same page. This is once again, and I want to make sure that Vice President Moreno, you hear this as well. And President Morrell, you hear this as well. And all the members of the administration, you hear this as well, is that these kind of moving parts right here also play a role in people's peace of mind with calling the title company to begin with, because they know things start to roll. And I just want to let you know that this thing rolls like a domino, and it rolls very fast because we already have owners And not only owner occupied, but we have owners and we have a handful of renters that we are determined that are not going to fall through these cracks. And at the minute at which an owner decides that they want to move forward on their offer, it jeopardizes and puts a renter in a very vulnerable place. So we are not going to run the risk of anybody being unnecessarily overburdened in displacement. This is already a process of displacement. And I just want to name that even though there's some people who are under the impression, and it is untrue, that the city of New Orleans is doing somebody a favor in this process, an entire community of people is being displaced in this process. And so we need this to be easy. So I'm going to follow up with just asking this question then, because I understand there could be one person here who calls and accepts their offer. It could be 60 people all call and accept their offer. So what we need to understand is, at what point will this contract or the money be moved to move on this? Because we are already aware of what that means for the one or two that have and or are ready to call the title company.
Ms. French?
Okay, because Angela, we have approved the draft for the CEA. I just cannot execute it
Yeah.
until it comes back. I will move forward with beginning to collect all of the necessary insurance documents so that once the trigger is pulled, we will have a valid list of moving companies ready to move. I will stand on the name of my agency that we will be able to advance at least the first until this is executed.
Yeah, and I can tell you that you know, the Ms. French, the CA is coming back to you tomorrow.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Okay.
it's coming back tomorrow, and then, you know, once you get your signature, we'll get it together and have the
All right.
contract.
Okay, so let me go a little further. So Mr. Threat, what is the difference between the CEA going to her tomorrow versus today?
The mayor's got to sign that one.
Okay, who can call the mayor?
That's not gonna happen today, Angela. I'm gonna just tell you.
That's fine.
Mr.
Not,
Threat,
fine.
let me say this.
That's fine.
Let me say this.
you got to sign it.
We have left this building once before. And everybody with some decision-making power made abundant promises. After the clusterfuck happened, the mayor also went on the news and said this was the best thing she has ever signed. I'm trying to understand why fundamental pieces that need to be signed have still not been signed, because I don't know what has been signed. We are coming in here with the ultimate spirit to move this forward. Somebody needs a deadline, because tomorrow, that just don't work anymore. So we can move on to number 4 and come back. But I want to go back to you, Ms. Threat, because Ms. French, we're trying to find out, even with this contract needing to be established, we still need to know a deadline by which you all will be done with your list of moving companies. So let's say, for example, the contract comes back today. If the contract were to come back today, how many more days would you need to work on that?
Okay.
So that we can get people to be thinking about what that means for them in terms of turnaround.
Whether or not the CEA gets to me today or tomorrow, I can tell you, and I have to give the moving companies at least 5 working days to get me all of their documents. We don't want to use a moving company that we don't have the documents on, and then we got to delay them. So I can tell you that tomorrow the letters will go out to the moving companies that have been identified.
Okay,
I'll ask them to provide the necessary documents to go on the vendor list.
okay,
So if you say next Monday, I'll have a valid vendor list. And if it is not concentrated, if that's not enough vendors, then we'll have to go back out again.
okay. So I want to thank you for indicating that you put your organization on the line to be responsible for the part that you need to do. We trust that that will be enough time because the expectation is that the city of New Orleans will do its part. The only reason we have to be extra about this today, to Mr. Threat and everybody else in this room, is because this piece right here, around the CEAs actually should be one of the easiest pieces of this equation because we've been talking about it for weeks. And I would actually say months at this point. And so it's gone through multiple hands for feedback, multiple hands for understanding. And if we're talking about a signature from somebody, then we need a signature. And I just want to go on record as saying we would appreciate if the mayor could support this as quickly as possible, because in the draft CEA, I didn't even see a signature line for the mayor. And so I just want to make sure that we can move this forward and not have any problem or unnecessary delay. So whatever can be done to support that process would be a wonderful thing for us today.
All right, so that brings us to item number 1, 2, 3, 4.
So for number 4, we fully understand that when it comes to the temporary housing regarding renters, it is our understanding that the provision for the renters should already be established. So before we even entertain a conversation about the owners or entertain a conversation about relocation costs, I don't want to mix these up. I want to talk about renters and renters only. So we came in here today thinking that there was going to be no question or concern about the moving service CEA, and we were simply coming in here to talk about a list of moving companies. So now I'm going to revisit this again to ensure that we're not incorrect about that. So should a renter need immediately? And the answer to that is actually yes at this point.
Mhm.
We need to know that there's no problem with the CEA, with TCA on that. So where are we with that?
Why don't we have Ms. Turner, someone from either you or someone from law, come explain that piece to us on where we are with that?
And at first, I'm only talking about the renters.
Just on the renter piece.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So what was your specific questions regarding rental assistance?
Well, can I
Yes,
hear?
and put the mic a little closer to your mouth, please.
For everyone in Gordon Plaza. So we've done research in conjunction with your council and found all of the relevant statutes regarding rental assistance. And because we are purchasing this property for a project, it appears as if everyone whose property we are purchasing will be entitled to a one-time rental assistance payment. So what we need to do is just figure out what that looks like. So Mr. Thread and I did have a conversation right before the meeting. We didn't get an opportunity to really see what that looks like, or if we even need a third party to administer those payments, or if we could just do it ourselves.
So what you're saying is that, hang on one second, hang on, let me just, so I this is the first that I just heard this. I'm just trying to get the understanding here. So you're saying that more than likely you would not need TCA to administer this rental assistance, because part of the question I think was around the TCA rental assistance CEA. So you're saying that that's potentially not even necessary?
That's what I'm saying, based on the statute and the codes that we are looking at, they are entitled to a lump sum rental assistance payment, and we can, if it's possible, and need to figure out the details, but we can just issue a check for that purpose. But I would need to talk to Mr. Thread and Mr. White. I'm not certain if we need a third party. It would just depend on Mr. Thread, and what DPW, his department,
We can
believes is necessary.
hopefully put in both.
So the point is that based upon the research our staff did collectively, in a situation such as this, a lump sum rental payment is available, and I think it's $5,200,
5250.
5,250. So that would be available to homeowners and to rentals. It's a lump sum payment. And so the city's position right now is that we're investigating whether or not we could just write the check for
Exactly.
that amount versus, because before the idea was that this would have to be a rental assistance that is managed by TCA, as in they would make the monthly payments or assign the lease or the like. If it's going to be a single lump sum payment, it may not be necessary to have it managed.
Exactly. That's
That
correct.
that is something worth exploring, just because the
Okay.
faster way to do it would be simply to cut a check.
Okay, let's pause for a second. Okay, three things. And we are going to work through it. One, we have literally spent nearly 2 months going back and forth over the draft for this TCA, CEA. And as a part of that, it was an understanding that renters would have their rent paid at fair market, because everybody loves fair market around here. Fair Housing gave us a list of what fair market would look like, and they would be paid up to a year. We have also made it very clear, and I want to say this, and I need everyone to listen carefully. We've also made it clear that we are very aware of the difference between unnecessary delays and when people are rushing a thing along that can leave people in a worse position after this is over than they are when they started. I do not know where anybody can go with $5,200 for a year. So that's number one. Through this process, the people who are not going to be permitted to fall through the cracks are renters. So the thing we appreciate is the fact that people are looking for a way to expedite this. We love that. We love that. But what there's a problem with is what's being proposed, and it's not even all the way figured out. And you know, when anything around here is even buttoned up tight by the time we walk out, it's a possibility that one of those buttons might pop by the time we wake up in the morning. So we need resolve on this. And while people are talking about what they got to figure out, I'm asking, and the residents are demanding, with everything that we have, that this gets resolved some way, somehow. We have all of the legal minds in the space right now. So whatever has to be worked out, we in this working meeting right now, because I'm going to tell you, we have a property owner by no mistake who has already contacted the title company, which means that we need this rental agreement to be established. And we were very much under the impression we were going to walk in here today because the draft has already been shared multiple times. It's already been forwarded multiple times. The residents have already reviewed it multiple times, and we're supposed to be done. So now if somebody wants to give a lump sum for the year amount, then we can wrap this conversation up. But to come with a halfway plan and a piece of an amount and still no full plan is disrespectful at this point.
So Angela, the original plan was modeled off of the emergency rental assistance program we've done previously with groups like the Willows relocation. The statute that you guys are aware of, you cited to us, which is 383105, specifically sets a limit on how much can be paid in relocation rental assistance, which is $5,200. So what we were contemplating previously for renters and for homeowners was based upon the Willows relocation. That is not the same as the relocation that's going through right now.
So
So
as
thirty,
it relates to
30
renters,
thirty one oh five.
let's be clear, Councilman Morel. As it relates to renters, we understand that the city of New Orleans has a vast range of options, and that is why you called TCA to begin with, because you understood that when it comes to renters, and that's what we're talking about right now, that in this process, that provisions can be made for them. We have a document from the city of New Orleans that has gone back multiple times and has gone through law multiple times. So any law that we're referencing that has to do with relocation costs, we are talking about temporary housing for rental assistance for housing. So if you want to give the renters a lump sum as well, that's separate and apart. But when it comes to housing, the renters didn't come in here initially asking for a lump sum of money. They came in here asking for what had already been agreed upon for the last 2 months. So if you need a minute to process that out, that's okay. But we need to work that out because we have renters in this room now who already have a deadline by which their keys must be turned in. So I don't want to go back and forth based on what people think, feel, and believe right now. We want to figure out how to resolve it to meet the agreement that was established. That CEA went through everybody's hands at this point. And so here we are. As a result of what? A law that was provided not by me, Mr. JP Morale, it was provided by Chair Gardner. And if you need to see that, that's fine. But I want to go on record as saying that has nothing to do with the temporary housing in the case of renters for rental assistance in the process of being disabled. So that's a different conversation. And it can easily be resolved today because as of yesterday, it was resolved. This wasn't supposed to be the complicated one of the day.
Angela, how many renters do you
We
have?
talking
on-
about a handful of them, and we can send you a list.
That would be great.
That is
with,
not, that's not even a
with the-
problem for us
with
to
the
send you a
closing
list.
dates. That would be fantastic. Thank you. All right.
Nobody is even prepared to make a move on something like that without knowing that they have an option. They want to be able just to pick up the line, call, and start working out what they need to.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to continue to get with our executive council and work through this. And I do promise to send a complete memo on everything that we have and to find all options possible. I do promise that.
We want to ensure that the CEA agreement that has already been processed, that those things are not compromised in this, because people have literally been planning their lives around these agreements and doing the best that they can to hold it together during this very tumultuous, untrustworthy process. So anything that anyone says that they're going to do, our effort is to be next level relentless about ensuring that it happens because people's lives are on the line. I don't know how many times we have to keep saying that to people. When this meeting is over, the people in this room will be going back to a hazardous waste landfill tonight. So I'm going to pause again because in effort to work it out, once again, we don't understand why we're here on April 17th at a 4 p.m. meeting, which is an hour later than the 3 p.m. that everybody asked for to say they could get work done, and it's still not done. So what does that look like, Vice President? Because people
Well-
need answers like now. Like if I moved away from this mic, they would come up here and tell you. And we don't have time or energy for people to be exhausting themselves about things.
No
that
doubt.
already
No,
been
I
communicated.
agree with you. And I've been with y'all every single step of the way. I get it. I hear you. So you know that I do work quick, as does my staff. And I guarantee that I will get something to you as quickly as tomorrow afternoon. I mean, I have to, y'all know I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to try the absolute very best that I can, and I'll put all the lawyers in the room and come up with all the legal memos and all of the very best options around the rental assistance and present those to you by tomorrow afternoon. And I do commit to that.
I want to help you with that.
Okay, great. I'll take your help.
When the city of New Orleans allowed slumlords to take rent from residents across this city, and it was finally brought to their attention that people like Bruno and the rest of them could do whatever the fuck they want in this city, it was dragged out beyond measure for a way to be able to ensure that renters could be attended to. Now, we understand that there are a variety of ways. So it's not a matter of if it's possible. It's a matter of whether people want to do it. And as of yesterday, actually minutes before this meeting, we were already under the impression that it was established. Why? Because we've seen all of the agreements going back and forth from the city of New Orleans. To include, everybody has seen it. So I just want to say that to you, Vice President, because we're ready to move forward.
I gotcha. Joe, will you help me with that too and look into that? All right, Joe's gonna help me too. We'll determine all different types of available options and present those to you all in a memo tomorrow so that everyone at least has it in writing and everyone can see it clearly. And so it's not just a bunch of words out here. You can see it in writing for yourselves, okay? All right. That brings us to the next item, Angela. I just misplaced my agenda. Can you read it out for me, please? There it is. The relocation costs.
So I want to come back to you, JP Morrell, and just before we go to relocation costs, because that's where we're going to put all of our time and energy today, I would just like you to at least acknowledge that we are moving forward with relocation costs and not entertaining a conversation right now with temporary housing for the owners.
When you said, first off, we're going to 5 relocation costs. What do you mean by moving forward? Do you mean that the numbers that you guys sent to us?
I'm saying we're moving forward to the next agenda item. And the reason we're not talking about issues around the owners is because you've received guidance from Cher Garner.
I pulled my information from my research from the email that was sent to the residents of Gordon Plaza to Mr. Threat, myself, and Councilmember Moreno.
Mm-hmm.
These are the statutes I pulled where the statutes referenced in your letter, not from Cher Garner.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I have here as far as research is from the email you sent to us.
Mhm.
I don't interact with Cher Garner at
Okay.
all.
Well, I'm gonna say to you that I just need you to correct the media then, because the media has you on record, and I just want to give you an opportunity to correct it if it's not true that you were informed by Cher Garner to take the position.
I was informed by the city attorney's office.
Okay.
Was informed by Cher Gardner.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
As you know, the media doesn't always get quotes correct.
Okay,
They paraphrase all the time.
well, I just want to name it because that particular reference that you're referring to there also comes from Cher Garner.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about relocation costs. That's number 5.
Yeah, usually you start off with a little bit more than that. So, but yes, let's talk about the relocation costs. So you all had submitted to us, thank you, Joe, a list of, expenses, relocation expenses, roughly totaling $25,000.
Correct.
Which in the letter, it says you would like paid in a lump sum. So once again, there's been a series of different research that myself and Councilmember Morrell have asked our staff, along with our executive council and his team, to look into this particular provision. From what we have found, we don't see anything in law that provides for a lump sum that by any means could be any higher than for an 8-bedroom home at $1,900 is the absolute most that law would provide for. Now, hang on. Now, that doesn't mean though that there aren't expenses that could be submitted and then paid for by the city. But as far the issue is the lump sum that from everything that's been put in front of me, that seems to be the prohibited amount to just write a check for.
Okay, so let's speak to a few things.
And I do have some folks in our legal team that are here too, because I might not be able to answer all the legal stuff, so.
Okay, so the problem with the conversation around relocation costs is it takes us back to where we were early on when we were talking about other things in the process of moving this forward. And what we were saying then ended up being exactly the way it's played out now. Things like, we only needed an appraiser, only needed a title company, only needed an appraisal, move forward with the offer. The thing that's very troubling is that this conversation about relocation costs is not new. All the way going back to even before Chair Garner signed their $100,000 contract for this portion of the job out of the $2 million line item. We are naming that because after the very first meeting, it was really evident that it had been named that the residents of Gordon Plaza had already been able to articulate exactly what they needed in terms of moving expenses long ago, because they were very much under the impression that when those first round of surveys from the city of New Orleans went out, they started actually calculating dollar for dollar what it would cost them personally to pay for their move, knowing that this is a situation where their houses are not only soiled with the toxins, but now, and we can name people who are in the space right now who've had floods in their homes, the toxins have come up into their furniture. They're either gonna have to deep clean those things or replace them all together. In some cases, some people are gonna have to replace some and leave others behind. I don't know if it's the case or not. As it relates to Ms. Fishman, and I'm grateful to see you in the space today because you attended the first meeting. And one of the things that I remember hearing you say on the way out was that you weren't sure about why those people needed that much money for moving or relocation costs. Because if I had to move, I would just call my 2 sons. And unfortunately, the residents of Gordon Plaza are not in the position that you are in. And this is why we can't trust random judgment about these things. We have to go by what the needs are. So when it says things like reasonable expenses, these are reasonable expenses. These are the things that are necessary for a relocation, knowing that this particular situation warrants each and every one of these dollars. And the residents are not trying to get over on anybody because they don't even include what you have already cared for, which is for the moving trucks and companies. These are things they're gonna have to pay out of their pocket. And you can see now, we are trying to get an easy transaction taken care of, a very easy transaction taken care of. And because we're trying to get this easy transaction taken care of, The residents cannot trust that they can be running up in here every time they need something with an invoice or a receipt to make that happen. We have to figure out how to make this work for them.
I saw you click your mic. Did you have something? to say? Okay. Yeah, I mean, Angela, everything I'm seeing from the legal side, and I hear what you're saying. It's just like the moving expenses, you know, how with the moving expenses, it was determined that they had to submit, you know, the moving expenses, that it wasn't a lump sum for moving. It's the same too with relocation.
I don't understand.
So for the moving expenses, when you do that through TCA, no one's just getting like a lump sum for moving expenses. It's going to be the same as with the relocation costs. You would have to provide the expenditures to get that paid for. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
No.
I think
didn't make
what she's trying to say is with the moving expenses, the reason why TCA is managing that is that the companies themselves are invoicing us for every specific thing they're doing, and TCA is paying them directly. That is why the moving expenses are covered. If you look at the statute, which is statute 383104A1, it lists many of the things that you're talking about, but in the statute it is all reimbursement. It's all so it's not capped per se, but they're the only in the statute. There is a cap on a lump sum payment. You can either submit reimbursement and it be essentially uncapped, or if you want a lump sum up front because you don't want to do reimbursement, it is capped at $1,900. You can either, right, for 8 rooms. So basically you can either have all these costs, show up with the receipts, and it's essentially uncapped as long as the expenses are deemed reasonable and necessary under the law. But if you want a lump sum up front with no receipts, no oversight, it's capped at $1,900 based upon a relocation movie schedule set by the federal government. And
So, number one, when it comes to this $1,900, can one of you print that legislation out and bring it down to me, please?
Here, you want to grab a mic? Copy.
they'll print copies of it.
Sorry, I'm chewing on a throat lozenge here. Let me just read you the schedule that I have while Andrew prints this out. For 1 room, it's $600. For 2 rooms, $800.
Can I have a copy of that as well, Vice President?
You got it. 3 rooms, $1,000. 4 rooms, $1,200. 5 rooms, $1,300. 6 rooms, $1,550. 7 rooms, $1,700. 8 rooms, $1,900 is the schedule that we have from the federal government. And we'll print that all out for you along with the accompanying legislation that refers to this particular table.
I'm gonna wait a minute for it to come down.
Joe?
Hey, Angela,
Yeah.
I had a couple questions on
Hold
the relocation
Mhm.
expenses. Because some of it I think is, well, if you could go down that list, do you have it with you, Angela?
Yes.
Could you just give me an explanation? Because like one item I see like moving supplies or the boxes, packing and everything else, we've embedded that. So to move, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. French, we have, we're gonna exercise moving companies to come to move, pack it up and do the whole enchilada.
Well,
So-
let me just pause there, Mr. Threat. So that's what the understanding that's how a resident desires, because remember, we asked for there to have one of 2 options,
Right.
that they could have full service, which includes that, and or that they could have the option, if they needed to, pack some things up themselves. There are some people who are not gonna wait for the first time they see a mover to start arranging their things and packing. So in order to organize accordingly, they're gonna need to actually have boxes in their possession to do that. And we have to be able to mitigate that in a real way. I would also just say, as it relates to any of these particular expenses in the line item, I still need to see the legislation because that plays a role in terms of what we're examining here. So I just would like to wait, and it's okay if we need to wait a minute for that.
Why can't why don't we just go through the line item though, Angela, because it might be just a couple minutes, just so that, everything included, what does that look like?
Yeah, give us 1 minute, please.
It's almost.
Yeah, they
done.
want to wait until the documents come down.
Sure.
So
he's
move
almost
on.
done copying it.
I know.
All right, everyone, Andrew has copies. He is going to, Andrew, why don't you walk everyone? Andrew, why don't you walk everyone with the documents that you have and what you're going to be providing so that everyone understands exactly like what they're looking at, because you also are going to give them a table which includes the different kind of costs that can be allocated in a lump sum per state.
Sure, and I'm not the expert on this, but I'll pretend to be the lawyer on it.
Is somebody bringing a copy down?
Yeah, they're
I'm gonna
right
bring
there.
them in-
He's
I'm
just
just-
gonna walk you through the
just to
different
make sure they're in
documents
Order, so
Okay.
before I present them. to
and then
you
he's gonna
guys,
provide them to you. So you know
Yeah,
what you're
so
looking at.
what you've got here are 4 documents. All of these are sort of treaties regarding Louisiana law related to 4 subjects. One is relocation payments, which we've noted in the past. I think Councilmember Morel was talking about. There's also the same regarding replacement housing payments. And there's also an administrative code section that refers to that, which gets us to this fixed residential moving cost sheet, which is from the feds here, that gives you that number that was cited earlier is provided for in this document here. See, Louisiana is down here, $1,900. I can highlight that, but you can see we're state number 21. I'm gonna put this all in order, and I'm gonna provide this for everyone so that they can review that themselves. These are, I think, both of these, 2 of these code sections, I'm sorry, 2 of these statutes were provided for in a letter that y'all sent. But there's some more information regarding the administrative code as well, which I think will be helpful for understanding. So give me one moment to make sure I have my copies in order. I'm gonna come right down.
Katie, can you help him and also bring it, the copies down to law as well? Thank you.
We've got.
You have them already?
have everything.
Okay, just making sure.
Thank you.
And I have 10 copies. I can make more if everybody would like to have one, but I just want to do it as quickly as possible. So give me a moment.
We can use this table right here.
Correct. That was, I think, referenced in.
No, just wait. We're gonna go.
Angela, should we walk through this again?
Yeah, I'm just giving them a minute. They-
Sure.
I think that's. Vice
Yes, ma'am.
President, there are a few more residents asking if they can have more copies if it possible.
Sure.
At least we can, just give us one more minute and.
I know Andrew's over there explaining. So when he's done, he can print out some more copies.
Well, we don't mind having the conversation for everyone.
I think they asked him questions directly. And we can have the whole conversation. I can bring Adam Swensick out. He can have the whole conversation with all of us. If you're ready.
Waiting.
Andrew, we're going to continue on. Yeah. And if you and Sadie can make a few more copies, that would be great. Thank you. All right, let's walk through the documents because I know that there's several, and you also have a cost schedule as well that's been provided to you. I have Adam Swensick with us, and he is, as you all know, the city council's legal expert and attorney. Adam has done extensive research on this along with mine and Councilmember Morrell's staff.
Thank you.
And so, Adam, tell us about what you have found with the relocation costs, the different statutes, and how they all kind of work together.
Certainly. So the basis for our paying fair market value for the Gordon Plaza homes arises from the fact that we're doing this solar farm project. There's, already a judgment on the books from some litigation, but we are paying the Gordon Plaza residents because the city is going to do a solar farm. As part and parcel of that city-funded initiative, we are allowed by state law to make additional payments. State law, I'll call it 3104, governs the relocation piece that talks about what is an allowable moving expense, all the costs associated with that set forth in state law. There's a corresponding section of the administrative code that governs it. Relocation payments, sort of the way it works is you can compensate a displaced person for actual and reasonable expenses. And it's that actual language, which is why you need you can't submit just here's what it would cost. Actual means we need receipts. If you don't do actual, that's when you can take a lump sum payment based on this schedule that we gave you. That's the Federal Highway Administration puts that out. Replacement housing, and that's the rental assistance piece, that's governed by 3105, and you have that. And there's also and if you look on second page, B1, we can pay a renter the amount necessary to blah, 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 and it talks about $4,000. That's the total allowable rental payment that we can do in a lump sum. That's obviously a pretty small number. It's not the 5250. if you look at the section of the administrative code that was sent around, that's section 109. They did kind of an inflation adjustment of that 4,000. And that's where we get the 5,250. And if you go on to the fourth page of the document, part 6 in the middle of the page, that's the basis for giving the 5,250, where you have a 180-day homeowner occupant to be eligible for the payment. They can get rental assistance not to exceed 5,250. I don't know that that makes things clear, but that's the basis. That's what you were handed. That's the law we're talking about right now.
Okay, so I want to loop back to Councilman Morrell, just real quick. Excuse me, sir, what's your name? Sir, what's your name?
My name, Andrew Gregorian.
I'm sorry, can you in the mic?
Andrew Gregorian.
Andrew
Gregorian.
Gregorian, okay, thank you, Andrew. Yes, ask a question, so I'm just giving you an honest answer. You said you don't know if that makes sense, but that's what you have. And I want to just share with you, it does not quite make sense. And I want to share why. Councilman Morrell, this is where we need everybody to really lean in, because this meeting could go so much faster. We know that these laws, and we're going to get to them in a second, which people are still kind of struggling their way through right now, are always the barrier when people don't want to move a thing forward. So let me share with you why the issue came up in regards to the moving company and TCA and all those things. It's not only about what can be paid out directly or not directly. It's about what people decide using their judgment they want to put in people's hands or not put in people's hands. Now, the residents of Gordon Plaza had no problem with the moving company being a part of the process with TCA, because either way, it's a call, it's a coordination, it's a pickup, it's a payment. But we understand that when we're talking about things like what's even listed in these relocation costs legislation, these are lots of little things that people have to contend with from day to day to day, which is also why it was indicated which fees and costs should be paid directly to the owner to avoid having to seek reimbursement. That comes from the people that the city of New Orleans hired. Now we're at this place now, and now folks want to find all the kind of reasons by which you can't pay. This is only based on what other folks think is reasonable. There's a reason why part of the advice was originally pay the costs and fees directly to the owners to avoid having to seek reimbursement, is because at that time, it was an understanding that they wanted to do whatever they could to make it easy on the process, because that was the courting phase at that point. So that should not change right now. That shouldn't be different. The only reason that those two little pieces of legislation were given to you was to try to provide them to you for ease sake. But there's a plethora of other legislation that your council does know about that could make this as easy as possible. So I'm saying to you again, not only, Andrew, when we're talking about this piece here connected to 3104, but going back down to 49 CFR 106 and 303. Underneath uniform relocation assistance and real property, you don't have to do all this back and forth. Now, when it comes down to these amounts right here, if you are saying that you feel that This fixed residential moving cost schedule is all that you can give under a particular law, then I would ask you all as attorneys, and I mean this from the utmost level of respect for all the people who are doing the best they can with what they have on any given day, is to use these laws not to create barriers for people, but to actually problem solve. So I want to go further and say, not only your 3101, you also talk about the agencies being allowed to compensate displaced persons for actual reasonable expenses. That applies to both. That applies to the owners and the renters. And I continue to keep these conversations separated just so that we can get some clarity about one. Because if we cared about people, we would be trying to use the law to problem solve, not create barriers. And that's what's happening here. That's what's been happening ever since there was even a conversation about allocating these funds. So we have to focus on the main thing right now. Thank you. If you need to use law 1 to pay out your lump sum and law 2 to pay out the rest, then do that. But this is achievable. And again, the residents understand they're under the utmost scrutiny. They're not coming here asking for something that they don't actually need. To be honest with you, you're not the only ones tired of them. They tired of y'all. They wish they could have took those offer letters and ran with them. They wish they could be done. But they understand that they'll be in worse conditions if they don't be sensible about the actual relocation costs that they had to outline as realistic costs for them when this process started. They understood what their relocation costs are. And this is why we're extra sick and tired of this, because we have so many people in here who are attorneys who can problem solve some shit when it's a priority to you. We're asking you to understand that the demand is to prioritize the residents of Gordon Plaza to move this forward. And even the lump sum dollar amount has changed twice since we've been in here. So I'm just going to pause for a second to give people a chance to process, because we need to problem solve to move this forward. And dropping some little paper on our laps talking about some $1,000, you know good and well that this law makes provision for what you deem it to be making provision for. Because if we're talking about something that is in question, we can cross that bridge when we get to it. But I can tell you right now that we need to get this down, because this $1,000 mark right here is not going to cut it.
Angela, you mentioned that there were other provisions of law that you thought that we need to look at. Will you please send us all of that as well? I know you
I'm
all
going to
have.
do you one better.
Great.
I'm going to ask you
Mhm.
if you can take some time to actually look at all of the relocation legislation that has gone back and forth between council. Ask for it so you can look at it, because they have it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've looked at it and I hear what you're saying, and everything that I've seen goes back to the reimbursable piece, that there's that cap on a lump sum,
Okay,
but
well, let me ask
not
you
on a
this then.
reimbursable piece. So it's not that the expenses can't be paid for. It's not that these things can't be paid for.
Mhm.
It's about just the lump sum without the receipts.
Okay, so what is,
Sir,
let's talk
there's
about
a
this.
route,
for-
there's a
let-
route to do that.
Let's talk about this for a second.
Sure.
Can you explain to us why there was an emphasis on avoiding owners having to seek reimbursement?
What do you mean?
You had said you had seen what they been exchanging. Can you talk about why there was an emphasis on owners, preventing owners from having to seek reimbursement? I mean, it could be for them to explain, it could be for whoever to explain, but we need to name that because something as simple as an exchange coming to this building to sign out a piece of paper, we cannot imagine what this building is going to contend with and what the residents are going to have to contend with people having to be in the middle of a move and work out reimbursement, because part of the reason people are going to immediately need reimbursement is because they're going to need that money to do the next thing. But if they had it all up front, they could just take care of it all up front.
The issue is the governing piece of law has a differentiation between actual and reasonable expenses or a lump sum. That's why the actual and reasonable expenses, that defines you've paid it and you bring the receipts. As we stated before, the law is very clear. That number for reimbursement is not capped. It's not capped in the law because if you provide government with the actual receipts, we can then reimburse you for those costs.
Okay.
It then gives the alternative or a lump sum, and the lump sum is the number we keep citing.
Okay.
So I know there is some, I know you keep citing CFR 303, and that federal statute deals with civil rights complaints. The challenge we have right now is that this entire structure of the way we're doing the payment is based upon expropriation, not upon a civil rights complaint.
Okay.
So we're governed
Mhm.
by the structure we have right now, which is that we're building a solar farm
Mhm.
and we're paying the residents to all these different pots of money to be expropriated, so to speak.
Mhm.
If you were in the middle of a federal lawsuit or with the federal government settling a civil rights complaint, that some of those statutes would govern, but this is not. For practical purposes of this transaction, this is an expropriation, not a civil rights settlement.
It's my understanding that this is a buyout.
It's a buyout from an expropriation.
Okay. Well, with that being said, people are still being displaced in the process. And the same law applies. And if we're talking about this lump sum, my question to you then is, for these following laws and the ones that people are indicating that they are prepared to check on, we are asking you to problem solve, because see, this is the first time people are bringing this up today, and we've been asking about this for 2 months. And the last time we just made an attempt to even take a moment and trust that what we actually saw in writing would be honored, it was not. And we haven't heard the same answer from anybody about even what those sums are, whether it be for the owner or the renter. So we need some further clarification.
Well, on the rental piece, I already said that I'd come back with more for you all and potential options by tomorrow afternoon. I'd already promised that, and I keep my promises. So we will do what we can on that. With this, I know that Joe wanted to run down the list of the relocation expenses. You want to go through that, Angela, for us, please?
You haven't told us that you could pay for them yet.
Well, I mean, I think it would be good for us to have full understanding of all of these as well.
No, we want to have full understanding. We're happy to read through the list. We're trying to get understanding about how they're going to get paid for.
Yeah, everything that we have seen, and I know we've said this several times. Do you want to jump in here, Mr. Gregorian? I saw you grab the mic. Is that we can't provide the lump sum of a total of $25,000, but expenses are reimbursable. And so that's why, to Mr. Threat's question, to go through the different expenses, I think would be, helpful.
Okay, just one more minute. So as it relates to the lump sum, can we confirm again what people are saying in regards to the lump sum for owners? You are saying that the lump sum is what is on this document from the 2021 fixed residential moving cost schedule.
Correct. So that there's two lump sums. As you know, as we stated in the law, there is a lump sum for rental assistance, which is $5,200. And then there's a lump sum for moving expenses. Relocations are relocation expenses, which is capped out at $1,900 for an 8-bedroom house. And we have the schedule showing you how much per room. So those are the two lump sums that are available in lump sums to a homeowner. Now, if a homeowner chooses to take the lump sum for the relocation expenses, they can't come back and itemize. So you have to pick. Do you want the lump sum for the itemized, or do you want the lump sum up front, or do you want to itemize and try and get reimbursement? That is a choice under the law.
Okay,
And to be clear, just to reiterate, itemized is not capped. Only the lump sum is capped.
okay, can you process through? And I know it feels tedious to y'all, but we need it. Whatever is considered itemized, what is that process look like in real time?
What the way it's described under administrative law, Title 70, it's Roman numeral, Section 107 is transportation of displaced person and personal property distance of a move not to exceed 50 miles unless greater distance justified, packing, crating, unpacking, and uncrating of personal property, disconnecting, dismantling, removing, reassembling, and reinstalling relocated household appliances and other personal property, storage of personal property for a maximum of 12 months, insurance for a move, replacement of property lost, stolen, or damaged in the process of moving, which insurance doesn't cover, loss, and other expenses determined reasonable and necessary. That's lifted from the administrative code.
I mean, when someone needs their utilities connected on or off, how do they get reimbursed? What does the process look like in real time for a person who is moving? What steps do they need to take to get reimbursed for money that they've already spent, if they even have the money to spend it?
We would have to establish that process for creating how we'd reimburse.
There's got to be a process. There's got to be a process if we're talking about reimbursement.
To be honest, there's no process because we've never done anything like this before.
And this is
So
why we're saying there's an opportunity to problem solve proactively. And because we've been talking about this, how long have we been talking? So whose responsibility is it to determine the process?
What do you think? The CAO's office, Mr. Threat, would be responsible for coming up with the process?
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the reasons Angela asked about the list. I mean, for instance, there's the item here that says building fees. I mean, what does that equate to?
Oh, in terms of, there's two categories here, and one of them has to do with the deep cleaning for furniture, but one has to do for the actual building. There's some residents that not only have actual houses, but they actually have buildings and sheds with their houses, and they need to be able to clean those things, and they need to be able to prepare them for either moving or replace them. Somebody have a napkin?
But the professional house cleaning fees or
Yeah,
that
that's
for
for
the
the
house
house.
that they're moving out of,
Yes.
that the city's gonna buy.
No, not out of. not out of, into.
Professional house cleaning.
Yes, that's not out of, into. Whether a person has a new home or not, there's gonna be costs associated with cleaning before they move their things in.
What's the lawn care for?
Lawn,
The- the-
lawn care.
Is it, I'm just wondering, hang on, Mr. Hempel.
Yeah.
Is it for the current home or is it for the new home?
No, it's in the transition as they move to their new home.
So it's for the new house lawn care?
Mhm.
Well, I think, Mr. Threat, we need to figure out the process. If you could get with your team, work with Angela to figure out the process as quickly as possible on these additional,
Yeah, and for the residents, I mean, just thinking out the box, I'm just looking at, I mean, the city is paying the buyers and the sellers costs. And usually when you're selling a piece of property, it's negotiations back and forth to see what's included in the buyers and sellers costs. And I'll have to get legal, advice on that, but can we include some of these costs? And that's why I asked the question on what each one of them was.
Mhm.
At some point, we got to meet in the middle of the road and see what we can do about it, but I'm just wondering if I can put this list or some of these things in the buyer's cost for
that was-
settlement and the title.
That was really the residents' desire for itemizing them by line to help make it as transparent as possible. I just want to go on record as saying, when it comes to what's transpiring for the renters, relocation fee, the owners, and just relocation costs as a whole, we're not yet satisfied with the conversation in regards to this legislation because there's lots of moving parts. It's very clear that people are interpreting these slightly differently. And we understand once again that people can problem solve and use the law to achieve outcomes that move a thing forward or create barriers. And we want to remove as many barriers as possible. We also understand that in this entire process, had this not been something that was a concern to people to begin with, about the residents being so clear-minded about what they needed, this wouldn't even be an issue about these relocation costs. Because we do understand that this uniform relocation assistance amount per bedroom is one component of one law, and it does not suffice. And so it's really okay if people really need to process how to problem solve this, to address it, to move it forward, because we were very much under the impression that that's what people were doing prior to today. So we can set the next Gordon Plaza meeting for as soon as you're ready to have it, because we're not trying to take this into next week.
Okay, let's do it. Andrew, can you pull up the calendar, please?
Well, I can tell you, for Gordon Plaza residents, I've, sent the email to Law.
Mhm.
We're gonna move the, CEA for moving expense,
Thank
the
you.
total amount to TCA. Hopefully I'll get that to them tomorrow, but it is a mayor's signature line on there, so TCA will probably have that document tomorrow.
We'll probably have it, or you can assure that they will have it.
It'll be there.
Okay, thank you.
Is the chamber open on Friday? All right, can you all come back on, how does your schedule look Friday afternoon? We have a committee meet. Only reason I'm not saying the morning is because we have a committee meeting in the morning. But we'll probably be done at like noon.
Mhm.
If noon works, 1 o'clock. Does that work for you all Friday? Does that work?
Can we do 2 o'clock?
Oh,
Is that possible?
I can't do 2 either. No way you can do,
We can do
Ms.
one.
Rainey, you can do 1,
1:30?
1 o'clock. You can't do 1. What time can you do noon? Oh. Okay. All right. Councilmember Morel can't be here on Friday afternoon. I can be here. Can you be here, Mr. Threat? Ms. Turner, can you be here with your team?
Friday. 1 o'clock.
Looks like around 1 o'clock.
Can we ask for 1:30, please? We just need we need some transition time.
Okay. Councilmember Morel will, if he can get loose, he's gonna be here at 1:30. That work,
Hey.
Andrew, 1:30? Can you check with CAO Montano as well for 1:30? All
I
right.
want to name just really quickly. We know that this process has been tumultuous, more so for the residents than anybody. But we need to say that the reason for coming back on relocation costs is because folks need time to figure it out. And so we want to honor that time to be used for such, because people are ready to make decisions on offer letters, and they have to navigate every dime at this point. We recognize that every homeowner did not receive the same amount for an offer letter. And so they're still in discussions with their families about how to make some things work. And even the people who might have received lower numbers or higher numbers, they have to look at that in relationship to where it is they need to go or want to go. And every dime matters at this point. And as soon as this can get resolved, they are ready to move this forward as quickly as Brent is ready to answer the phone. But folks need their relocation costs. Just out of curiosity, between now and Friday, at 1:30, and this is a sincere question. When do you all have time to problem solve these things in between these meetings? I'm like asking in a real way, because sometimes it feels like people wait until like right before the meeting to try to pull things together. And it adds time when these things could be resolved, and or they are trusting that what somebody else told them worked. And we're saying that if people would be as thoughtful about this situation as they would be thoughtful about if you or your own family or somebody lived on a toxic landfill, we could expedite this, because it's surprising to me that the residents could even be as patient as they are, considering the bullshit that went down this past week. And so we are coming for resolve. We are thankful to those who were able to come with what they could to address some agenda items that we can check off of the list, but we need to address all 5 of these.
I've got a question for you. The Gordon Plaza residents, Angela, do any of the residents have parking tickets that they received last week? If you could bring them, if I could collect them from you after this meeting, that'd be good, and I'll take care of those.
And Mr. Threat, one more thing. As it relates to this process, if there's a question or a need that has to be addressed, if there's a way that we could hear from you all before Friday, so that if we need to address something that could get resolved before Friday, that we try to do that, because we're not in a position to keep coming back up here, but are prepared to come back up here if need be. And so if there's some things that you have questions about or that can be resolved in advance, but this piece right here is on you guys, because we know that it's addressable if we can use the laws to problem solve and not to create barriers.
Thank you, Angela. Well, you'll hear from me tomorrow. And then Joe and I were talking about getting with Bayou Title on a couple of things. So you'll probably hear from Joe on some on Bayou Title stuff. And Councilmember Morrell and his team have been working on a variety of different things with you all for quite some time. So you may be hearing from him this week. But for sure, you'll hear from me tomorrow. All right, everybody. See y'all in person 1:30 Friday.
Councilmember Moreno, I have one more thing. I have 8 offer letters. So if there are some people in the audience who didn't receive their offer letters, I have them here with me.
Thank you for that. They're coming for them right now. Ms. Turner, do we have the 3 that came back down that needed to be corrected? Do we have those as well? Okay. If there are folks who need to still pick up yours, if you would come up here, please. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Mr. Yeah, no, we're gonna.